Hello, everyone. Welcome to our service at Pathway. I hope you're having a great summer. And even as we go through this summer, I'd encourage you to really look for the opportunities for you to do outreach and for you to help the people around you. And I had a new opportunity that I was doing this week. On Wednesday, I participated in a food donation that was done by the Fremont Unified School District, and it was coordinated by CityServe, so some of the volunteers were with CityServe that we're a part of as Pathway. And so we gave out school lunches and boxes of produce at Washington High School. We gave out more than 400 school lunches to people who drove through and picked them up, and more than 150 boxes of produce. So it's been amazing and troubling to see the level of food instability, the level of food need in our area. And that's one of the ways that we can support the local area food banks and others who are making a difference in this way. And I know a lot of us are active in helping our friends and people in the congregation who are at home and getting them groceries, getting them tech support. So please keep that up. I've been really encouraged to hear those stories of all that you're doing. And let's continue to stand together and to push through and meet each other's needs as our community. Today, we're up to week 3 of our series, Do You Believe in Miracles? We've been looking at different miracles in the ministry of Jesus. We started in John chapter 5, looking at the man he healed by the pool. And there's a man who's an invalid for 38 years, and Jesus came, asked him if he wanted to be well, and healed him. He was able to walk right in that moment after his encounter with Jesus. Sometimes we looked at in that story that sometimes all we see are the obstacles, but that even if it doesn't fit our mold, God can still work miracles in us. He can still overcome whatever it is that we're facing to bring us to a place of healing and a place of wellness. Last week we were in John chapter 6. We were looking at how Jesus was feeding the 5,000. We looked at how we can multiply whatever we have right now to meet the needs of the people around us. We saw that sometimes the greatest ministry opportunities come in the distractions. When it seems like what we've planned and prepared for is going all off kilter and off track, but that's where some of the awesome opportunities come in. And so we looked at that story last week. Today we're moving to Mark. We're moving to a different gospel. I'm going to read from Mark chapter 4. So please read with me from Mark 4, verse 35 to 41. And I'm reading from the New International Version. So Mark 4:35, it says this: That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." What's the greatest storm that you've ever experienced? Take a minute to think about that. If you're at home with someone, you can share with them any storms that may come to mind. You can share with us in the chat as well. But think for a moment, have you ever been in a situation like that? Have you ever been in just this amazing, or scary weather occurrence of some kind, and it's just really threw you off? And I remember for me, several years ago, I went on a canoeing trip with some of my friends. We went out to the Boundary Waters. This was it was in Minnesota, and this was at the border between the U.S. and Canada. So there's a bunch of lakes and places you can go out there. They call it the Boundary Waters. And so it's just, lakes and islands, and it goes on for a really long ways. And I remember we went out for about a whole day, and then we camped out. We spent the night at this small deserted island. So nothing's on there. It was just us. And I remember that the wind was crazy. It was super intense. And we were completely unable to put up any tents because the wind would just knock it down immediately. And it was so strong that if you took a tarp and threw it the right way against a tree, the wind would just hold it up. And you didn't even need to, secure it. Just, it wouldn't fall down because the wind was so constant and it was so strong. So I remember we built, kind of a shelter around some trees with the tarps because they just stayed up with the wind. So to get back, we had to cross over a pretty large body of water, a pretty large lake area. And so what we did, so we got up that morning, we packed up our camp, got everything ready. We had several boats, some canoes, and at least one kayak. So we got in all of our boats, and so we're going across, and the wind was really strong. So the waves were getting high, and they were getting higher. So the wind was strong. We were paddling as hard as we could. We were pushing through when the canoe in front of me capsized. And the guys in that boat went into the water. They lost their gear. It went out into the lake, and so we were right behind them, and so we saw them in the water. So we went up, we grabbed them, we got them into our boat. The guy in the kayak he was a little more mobile. So he was able to grab the boat, as I remember, and get the gear back onto the boat. It did float, fortunately, and we didn't lose anything major. But we were able to get everything back to shore. And so we got the guys back to shore. The water was really cold, so we built a fire and warmed them up. We gave them some of the clothes that we were wearing, some of the clothes that we had to warm them up as they took off, what they had that was soaking wet. And then we regrouped, and we thought, well, the wind was just getting stronger as we went through the day. So we realized, we're not going to be able to make it out of here. We're stuck on this island for another night. And so some of the guys had to go back to work, supposed to go back to work the next day. So they had to call their boss and their company and tell them, well, I'm not able to make it into work because I'm stuck on a deserted island somewhere, in northern Minnesota between the U.S. and Canada. And even at the time, it seemed like a rather implausible excuse. But so we realized it was better early in the morning. So we got up early. I think it was like before 5. So we got up about 5 a.m., we packed everything up, and at that point the wind was a little bit lower, so we were able to make it across the lake. And we were able to get into the, closer to shore. It wasn't as large of a body of water. And then we canoed pretty much the whole day, portaging between places, carrying the canoes, and then canoeing the rest of the way. And we made it back. But I've never forgotten that experience. I've never forgotten how crazy it was to ride in those waves. And just to see how intense that was. As I was thinking about that story, it made me realize I really haven't been doing all that many adventures lately. And at this rate, I'm going to run out of good stories. So if things open up and if you're going anywhere interesting, then please let me know. And I'd love to come along with you. And that would be fun. But back to our text. We see in our text that the disciples are terrified. They're completely terrified for their lives. And these are fishermen. These are fishermen who spent their whole lives on this lake. They were used to storms. This was nothing new for them. They're used to the water. They're used to boats. So for them to have been that scared, it must have been quite a storm. It must have been quite a bit worse than usual and what they would go through normally. And I wonder, we're not told a lot of other details about what happened. I wonder how long they went before they woke Jesus up. We're not really told, what the time periods were. But I wonder, probably they started off assuming maybe the storm was just a regular one, like the other storms they'd gone through and they'd weathered in the past. Maybe they tried to paddle their way through it for a while before they started to get worried. We're told they were with other boats, so maybe they were trying to work together for a bit and then they got overwhelmed. So I wonder how much they tried to do before they panicked and then they decided it's time to wake Jesus up. I find the way that they phrased the question to Jesus rather revealing. And rather than just asking him, Jesus, wake up, help us, you see what they say. They make an accusing statement or question. Say, don't you care if we drown? It's such a loaded way to say that, right? How often do we go to God with accusations when, really we're asking for help, but we just end up accusing? And that's what they did here. So many of our prayers just end up being complaints. They end up being indictments of God when we feel he's not doing enough. He's not aware. He's not participating when we need help. I don't think when they woke Jesus up that they imagined he was going to stop the storm. I think they were thinking a lot differently, and they imagined maybe he'd help them row, maybe he would just hold the sail or whatever else they needed done in that moment. But it's clear they didn't realize Jesus' power. They were not expecting him, and they didn't see that he could do as much as he did. And which is why they're so surprised when he actually just ends the storm instead of just helping them with the boat as they might have imagined. And the way we go to God in prayer, the way that we ask for help, the way that we interact with God, it reveals what we most deeply believe about God. If we go to God accusing him of not caring, maybe it's because we unconsciously believe that God is malicious, that God is just enjoying the struggles we're in. He's just watching us suffer and just chuckling to himself. Or either that or that we don't believe that God really can help. We don't really believe in our heart of hearts that God is powerful enough to make a difference, that God will actually be able to make any meaningful difference in the storm that we're in. And when he acts in power and dramatically changes the situation, we're just completely overwhelmed. And it's nothing that we could have imagined or expected. So as you look at their response and the way the disciples handled this, ask yourself, how do you respond to a storm? How do you handle the storms that come your way? And in the story, there's such a tremendous contrast between Jesus and the disciples. Jesus was asleep. He didn't even realize it was raining. He didn't even realize the storm was happening. Or maybe he knew it, but he didn't care. He was fine. It didn't bother him, I guess, instead of not caring. But he was fine. But the disciples were just completely freaking out, as they usually do. For many of us, this COVID-19 season has been an unrelenting storm of anxiety, of pressure. For those of us who do have kids at home, you have to balance whatever work you need to do with taking care of them. And it looks like that may continue depending on what the school's reopening looks like. So it's just, for some of us, there's no end in sight. And it's brought out so much pressure that you have to handle. And it could be changes in your financial situation, changes in how you relate to people. I mean, all of us have gone through these changes. And as you've navigated this, what has it revealed about you? What have you learned about yourself in this season? And I know that as I've gone through this, I've seen a lot of things that have been revealed about me, some of them positive, with how we've managed to adapt and push forward, but some of them negative, and just some deeply negative things that I've seen in myself about how I respond to pressure, how I respond when I'm frustrated, when I'm very tired, when I'm feeling maybe more isolated or more alone. And I've been looking at my responses and how I respond when I'm apprehensive and so on, and how I can continue to refine my faith to navigate these storms. So as we navigate these storms in our lives, remember this. Remember that we are not in control. And in some ways, having an experience like what we're going through is a very positive experience, and it can be of great benefit to our spiritual life, even to our mental state and to our faith, because it reminds us how much we don't control. It reminds us how limited our capacity and even our perspective is. I mean, pretty much no one really saw this coming. It wasn't possible to predict, last year or 2 years ago. It came completely out of the blue. And so this is the kind of thing that reminds us that we like to be in control. We like to know what's happening. We like to plan. We like to anticipate the future and think through everything. No one likes being out of control, at least no one that I know. And it's a very scary feeling. But we have to recognize that we are not in charge of everything. We're not able to manage and control all that we're going through. But recognizing that can be a great blessing to us. It puts us in a position to see God working in ways that we wouldn't have imagined before. That when we're in control, that when we feel like everything's going our way, when we're looking at our bank account, we're looking at our house, we're looking at all the things that are going well, that's when we can become the most complacent. And it's when we can become the most secure in ourselves. You need to think about the idea of pride. The proverb, pride goes before a fall. Often that's what's setting us up for a tumble in the future. But it's times like these we need to reassess and recognize that we need God's help and that we are not actually controlling all that's happening to us. BG told me about when she was in her second year of college, or she was about to start her second year of college. It was just coming up. And her mom came and said, there's some financial pressures that I'm going through, and I'm not able to cover the tuition, the school fees for this next year. So we're going to have to figure out what else you can do. And so BG stayed up that night, and she thought through, what are my options? She tried to think, how can I get money? Where's it going to come from? What is this going to look like? It was only 2 weeks before school reopened, and she had to clear, the balance that was there. So she was very stressed about it. So finally, at about 3 a.m., after thinking through this and trying to come up with scenarios and planning, she prayed and said, okay, God, I'm just at a loss here. I don't have the money. I don't know anyone who has that much money. I don't have any immediate plans here. But I know that you are my Father. I know that you can provide for me. I know that you have all the resources that I need. And even though I don't know what's going to happen, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm just going to trust that you're going to take care of it. And I'm going to go through the next 2 weeks in the confidence that you're going to provide. And in the assurance that you're going to take care of me, whatever that looks like. So she did. She went to sleep. A couple of days later, she went to the school to clarify exactly how much she needed to pay. Went to the registrar and said, how much is it? What is my balance as of right now that needs to be covered? So the registrar looked up her name and said, you know what? Looking at your records, you don't owe anything. And it looks like your school fees are all paid. Everything this semester is covered. In fact, we owe you money. There's actually a surplus in your account. So it turned out that her mom, who worked at the college, had applied for financial aid a year before and had never heard anything back. So she assumed it had been denied, they moved on. But actually, they had been going through the previous applications, and they had actually granted it, and they had transferred the money into her account, and she hadn't even realized it. And so as BG went through the next couple of years of school, she didn't owe anything. And when she graduated, she was actually refunded money that had been overpaid. And she was able to get some of it back. So God provided and navigated her through that storm. And even when we go through storms, whether it's something like COVID-19 or something totally different, remember that God is in control. That we are not in charge, but God is still there. And we can let go. And we can trust that God is on the throne, that he will lead us, he will provide for us, and he will support us. We can give up worry, and we can simply trust. Just like Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, who of you by worrying can add a single year to your life, is the question he posed. And clearly we recognize that worry doesn't actually take us anywhere, and we don't need to do that. In addition to recognizing that we're not in control, we see from our passage that Jesus can calm a storm with his words. That's all that it takes. He just spoke to the wind. He rebuked it. He spoke to the waves, and they were calm. They actually were. The whole storm was gone. And so Jesus spoke to them as the Son of God, as he's sent by God to earth with a mission, with power, and he has the authority over nature. He has the authority over all the things of this world that we see demonstrated in this story and in many other stories. We see his power demonstrated over and over again. And we see how easy it is for him to handle these situations. So think about, what are the words of God that can calm your heart in a storm? Refresh your memory of God's promises, his assurances of what he's doing for you, of how he's redeemed you, how he loves you, how you're his child, how he's cared for you in the past. It's always helpful to remind ourselves of what God has done for us before, and to continue to reassure ourselves that we're with God and God is with us. And that as we go through the storm, that we take time to be with God and to rest in him. Think about how you can be calm with God, even in the middle of a storm. As you go through a medical situation like the pandemic we're in now, there's a lot of misinformation that goes around. There's a lot of confusion that we can get caught up in, even trying to keep track of what's the latest numbers, what's the latest rules about California and about Alameda County, and they keep changing. And we can get so stuck in navigating all that complexity and all that uncertainty that we can lose sight of the calm that Jesus can provide. That in the midst of what we don't know, because our knowledge will always be imperfect of any of these things, in the midst of what we're not sure about, in the midst of the changes, that Jesus has the power to calm these situations. So in the middle of whatever storm you're in, and whatever storms will still come up in future, remember to focus your perspective on who God is and what God is able to do. I have a couple steps. I want to walk through 3 steps that can help us as we do that. So the first one is to acknowledge the storm. That we recognize that we're in a problem. And I think right now we can recognize that this is, for all of us, it's an unprecedented situation. We've never gone through anything quite like this before. And when you're in debt, when your job is not going well, when your health is in crisis, whatever you're going through, that you acknowledge it, that you're honest, you're open, and you recognize that this is a problem. And sometimes it's easy to default to the place of denial and to say, no, I'm fine, I'm all good, nothing's wrong, well, I'm doing okay. But if we don't recognize, if we don't acknowledge that we're in a storm, it's that much harder to actually deal with it and to meaningfully navigate it. So acknowledge the storm that you're in. The second step B, would be to admit your limitations. To recognize, just as we said, that we're not in control. And that one of the key ingredients for a miracle is someone who needs help. If we all had everything sorted out, we wouldn't need God, would we? If we were all perfect, we wouldn't need help if we had everything sorted out. So we recognize that we're limited. We need help. We need God to intervene, and we need change in our lives. So just as you acknowledge the storm, be open with your need and with what you need God to do in God's intervention. And then finally, step 3 or step C, allow God to lead you through the storm. Allow God to show you the way forward. Remind yourself of God's character, that God is good, God is faithful, God can heal, God can provide, and follow his leading. Sometimes God may remove the storm completely, as in this story. Other times he may lead you through it, and the storm may remain. But whatever it is, God is still there, and he's still with you in these situations. He may sometimes even take you from a sunny, peaceful, non-stormy place into a storm as you follow his will, as you serve him, as you grow in faith. It may take you through unexpected storms. It may make your life more difficult, but God is still there, and he's still sustaining you. So when you're asking for God for help in a crisis, think about, what do you actually expect God to do? Do you have the faith that he will come through for you, that he will grant your desires, that he will sustain you with his power? Or have you set the bar too low? Have you ever been shocked by something that God has done that has overwhelmed your expectations? So as you pray with anticipation. As you spend time with God, as you interact with him, and as you spend time with others, set the bar high. Don't give God, don't downplay what you believe God is able to do. But operate with anticipation, operate with an expectation of his power. When Jesus calmed the storm and it was gone, the disciples were overwhelmed by that display of power. They became just as afraid of him, it seems, as they were of the storm. And they're saying, who is this? Who can do that? And that's the recognition when we're with God, that we're with someone who's completely beyond us, who has abilities different than we have, who can do so much more than we can ever do. And not only can he cast out evil spirits, not only can he multiply food to feed crowds, not only can he bring healing and can he raise you up from the dead, but he can control nature. And that was just beyond their expectation. From her story, B.G. shared that her thought process was, I knew 3 things for sure. I knew it was a ridiculous amount of money. I couldn't think of any way to raise it, no matter how hard I tried. And I knew that God was in control and that God was going to sort it out. So separate what is your responsibility from what is God's. And just recognize that once you've done what you're responsible to do, you can sit back, you can rest, you can allow God to take charge as we move forward. So spend time with God and remind yourself of his power, and the power of his words, his ability to calm the storms and to calm you. So let's close in prayer. Dear God, I thank you for today. I thank you for your power at work. I thank you for how you calmed the storm with the disciples, how you continue to lead us through COVID-19, as you lead us as a church, as you lead us as individuals. And I pray that we would rest in your power. I pray that we would be assured of your ability to handle any obstacle that we face. And I pray that we would be renewed in our faith. As you look at your miracles throughout this month, I pray that you would continue to revive us, O God. Continue to strengthen us. And that we would live on the basis of our understanding of you, on the basis of who you are and who we are as your children. So I pray for your power at work today. I pray that your Spirit would move throughout our online service, throughout every aspect of what we do, the words that we say, the songs that we sing, that you would be present in all of us, that wherever we are, in our homes, whether we're out, wherever we are, oh God, that you would be with us right now, that you would speak to us, and that you would revive our hearts, and that you would draw us back to yourself. So be at work, oh God. And I pray that you would blow us away with what you're able to do beyond what we can even imagine. Increase our faith and increase our trust in you, O Lord. Thank you for how good you are and all that you're doing. And I pray that we'd worship you and give back to you all that we have. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. I'll invite you to come back next week as we finish our series. We'll close out our series in miracles for the last week of July. And I want to leave you with some reflection questions to think about how you can apply what we've looked at. So think about, first of all, how can you build up your faith to trust God in the storms that you face? Where in your life, where can you let go and step back to allow God to take over a situation that you've been trying to manage? And as you remember that you're not in control, where can you step back? And what are the words of God that can calm you during a storm? So reflect on that. As you go through today, as you go through the days to come, as you go through the next week, think about how you can step back and rely on God. And you can entrust him with the storms that you're in. And that we can all trust him as we go through this and as we seek his face together. Have an awesome week. Take care. God bless.